My name is Taya Barrow, and I'm a writer and producer in Toronto. And I'm really glad to welcome you all to the ninth edition of the Toronto Black Film Festival and its very first online edition. Today's panel is titled What Has Changed Since the Black Lives Matter Movement? So, the epidemic of Black harassment and death that we witnessed last summer, including the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, seemed to open the world's eyes to a lot of these long overlooked injustices faced by Black people across the globe. And this new spotlight has forced a lot of arts-based industries as well to look at the importance of diversity and inclusion in every aspect. So today we're going to be talking a bit about what has changed in the industry since the events of last summer. And if anything, are those changes too slow? And are those changes enough? What other changes would you like to see? And we'll also look at some steps that are needed to ensure that these changes continue and that they last into the future as well. And of course, this is a conversation that affects many filmmakers, TV producers, writers, and so on. So I'm very honored to have a few of them in the room with me today, in our virtual room today. So Floyd Kane is a film producer. Jennifer Holness is an award-winning writer and producer. Sud Sutherland, also award-winning writer and producer. We also have Joyce Marie Fitzpatrick, who is an award-winning producer, writer, and director as well. And Brian Shackelford, who is also a producer, writer, and director. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Yes, thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, so as your moderator, I'll kind of be walking us through this process. As I mentioned before, we have an hour to kind of chat. So I'll dive right into our first question. And this first one is actually for everyone. So just going back to the events of last summer, what kinds of changes have you seen? So when you think about everything that's changed across the film industry landscape, what sticks out in your mind? And I'd like to start with Brian, and then we'll move to Suds, Jennifer, Floyd, and then Joyce.
Okay, thank you. I think, and it's funny that we asked this question because we just had a conversation similar to this earlier today with our distributor. I think one of the biggest changes that I see is that we're finally starting to get comfortable having the uncomfortable conversation. Because it's always been the elephant in the room about the type of content, about the type of content creators, about the demands that are being met, but nobody's really felt comfortable having those conversations. And what's happening now has forced us to have those conversations. I mean, it's literally a saying that I keep running through my head is that we have to all become comfortable being uncomfortable, because it's uncomfortable. Some feelings are going to get hurt. Some misunderstandings are going to happen. But I think by only having those conversations and starting that agenda towards and moving forward towards that is the only way we can make any type of progress. That's the really big change that I've seen. I've seen some doors that were open surprisingly closed. I've seen a lot of doors that were closed opening up to Black content creators, because again, it's no longer PC to have a lot of white creators creating Black content. I come from the reality background, and we did that a lot. I mean, you would take the same crew and run them through every production that you would have, rather your production was a white production or a Black production. So it's no longer, I think, PC to do those things. Now, it's a shame companies have their backs against the wall and have to do these things to survive. But that's one of the positive lights that I see that has happened, because I'm trying to find positives in it. Because if you look at all the negatives, boy.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, there sure are a lot of negatives for sure. Yeah. And Suds, what would you say has changed over the last year that you've seen?
I'd say like a lot has changed, but then not a lot has changed. Because like not a lot has changed is that Black people still getting killed by police, still getting harassed, still get like with impunity. It seems like the cops have even ramped that shit up now. And they're doing so and identifying with the, that whole sort of MAGA experience, and saying this very much us against them. And so where we are, always done stuff with the police in terms of like, we've done a lot of crime stuff. We've done a lot of, stuff that deals with crime. And so the cops we know, the people who, work as crime as a job that we know, like their world, it's like even more combative. On the filmmaker side, there are now greater opportunities. Now corporations and governments have now, they've looked and said, well, actually, it's not advantageous for us to not have a dialogue about systemic racism. It's not advantageous. The bottom line is people want to hear that message. So now all of a sudden some doors are open, and that's created opportunities for us all. That's created opportunities, like I'm sure Jen will talk about, the Black Screen Office. There are now more opportunities for us. So I would say that some opportunities, some doors now have been opened, but in terms of the Black community and police, I think in some ways, it's gotten a little worse because it's now openly confrontational, and they're in a siege mentality. I've heard this from officers who I've talked to in our research for this thing that we're doing, and they're saying that, well, it's kind of us against them, and they're feeling that when they go outside with they have a target on their back. They're feeling that they're being judged. And I'm like, okay, well, welcome to my world. welcome to how we feel as Black people, with you. So they're beginning to feel some of what we felt. So I think it's going to be a longer process, obviously, and it's an evolving conversation. But I would say some things have changed, some things gotten worse, and some things have actually opened up and gotten better. So it's a weird position that we're in right now, but we have to keep the dialogue. As Brian said, we have to have those uncomfortable conversations, and we have to keep the dialogue going because, for the realities for young Black men, young Black women who get stereotyped in the education system and the criminal justice system, those things are still happening. Those things have not changed one iota.
And Jen, what would you add to that?
Well, I think I agree with what both Brian and Suds have had to say, but one of the things that has changed is very tangible is the Black Screen Office in Canada. So when I started in the business, there was really very few organizations advocating for Black people. And one of the differences in America and Canada is that in Canada, there's literally nothing exists. And we had the Black Film and Video Network, with a very tiny organization that had almost no funding. And that went away for nearly 15 years. And it has been brutal. There's been nowhere to go. There's been no support. And, when I meet my American friends, they'll be like, oh, it's so tough. And I'll be like, oh, you have a community. You have no idea what it is. Because here in Canada, people don't even acknowledge these systemic problems. They do not acknowledge the racism. And so what was happening was people were behaving with impunity in terms of how they projects were selected. In America, you could turn and you could see that there were small but powerful and growing body of Black creators that were getting in there and was really making an impact and change in the narrative. In Canada, that wasn't happening. So we started the Black Screen Office as a direct response to George Floyd and Aubrey, Ahmaud and Breonna Taylor and all those Black folk, both in Canada and in America, that were gunned down by the police. And the Black Screen Office is a national group. We've never had this. That is whole purpose is to advocate for Black screen creators and producers. And it is we're working with the government, Telefilm, our funding organizations, CMF, Ministry of Heritage. We are creating something that's going to be a group much like the NAACP, and out of that, a community is growing and building with other BIPOC communities, something that didn't exist either before. And all of these things are tremendously important because we're just done. We're just tired. And I think at the end of the day, it's like you said, Brian, that elephant in the room that nobody's willing to talk about. Well, now producers don't necessarily have to put their lives and careers on the line by saying, maybe this is a little bit unfair. And then people say, what? You're not grateful that I gave you this little bone? Because we have a place that's going to advocate for us. And that's huge. But it's like it's just the beginning. And in some ways, It's gotten worse, and God knows, that backlash that we're so used to. I haven't seen it yet, and I'm not looking for it, but we're also aware, and we're going to try to steady ourselves so that if it comes, we are ready.
Yeah, and I definitely do want to come back to the Black Screen Office and the Canadian context in particular. But before then, we'll go to Floyd and then Joyce.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's like I've always felt like that's just the way it is. I don't know if, I think for some people it's worse because maybe there was a sense that, things were changing, because I think 8 years of us looking at the progress that was happening in the US and Obama and whatnot, I think we all kind of thought, oh, maybe there's some turnaround happening. But I just think that what we've been learning, I think, is just, we've been seeing the true hearts of people. And I think if anything, that's what we've learned, or we've started to learn since everything started happening with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I think work-wise, I mean, it's funny, like with Canada, I would say that with obviously with the exception of the formation of the BSO, which I think is amazing, I just feel like everything's been a lot of talk and very little action. There's been very little substantive change that has happened in terms of, entrenching any kind of funding for Black or racialized film and television content creators. I haven't seen any real initiatives coming out of the broadcasting sector. Like it just, to me, like it's been 6 months, and like it really hasn't, like I really don't know what has changed other than the fact that what all of this has exposed are the training gaps, the lack of us having a critical mass of racialized professionals in this country who are actually in a place to take advantage of opportunities that are currently being put on the table. I feel like if anything, what we're now seeing is the damage of our industry having been so exclusive for so long. And if anything, I think one of the things that, hopefully will be able to change, with the BSO and, some of our allies is will help be able to rectify that.
Okay. And Joyce, what have you seen that's changed and what hasn't from your perspective?
Well, first of all, what everyone else has said is so dead on, but it's bleak. I mean, Floyd, just even trying to put it into words, it's like he's just like, this is what we deal with on a daily basis. And to me, the way I see it, how, and I don't know how it is in Canada, but with sports, like with the teams, we're the players, but the real people that have the money and everything, the white, all of these white billionaires that, run the teams. That's how I kind of feel the way the industry is. It's like we're barely scratching the surface and barely breaking through. But at the end of the day, we don't own Paramount Studios. We don't own Universal Studios. And I'm speaking in the US terms here, but regardless, you guys can relate. And I think, I was trying to write down some thoughts. to share, like, you know, Stephen McQueen and Ava DuVernay and Jordan Peele and Issa Rae and Brian and Sud and Jennifer and Floyd, all you people that are doing what you need to do, you know, it's like we're barely just scratching the surface. You know, these people have been in power for so long that, you know, you have to come across as, excuse my French, a freaking, you know, I wanted to say the other word, but, you know, militant. You know, everybody looks at Ava and thinks, oh God, she's so militant. Well, hell, I mean, you gotta be to just make a dent. It's just so insane. And I think with COVID happening and with Floyd being killed and Breonna being killed, and let's not forget Sandra Bland. You know, I mean, people don't even talk about her. And then look about all these people that have never had their names mentioned that are dead in the United States and Canada, who will never hear their name mentioned. And it has nothing to do with them. I mean, it's just, I don't know where I think Black people are trying their best to get their stories out there so that other ethnicities, including, I guess, white people, can understand what's going on. And I think, you know, some white people who are in these positions as the team owners are trying, like a Ryan Murphy, you know, like he did it a while back where he started an initiative to bring on Black writers and different things. And now Issa Rae has joined, like, I think it's a particular organization we have here in the US that, in film. She's joined that team. But these people are just, you know, trying to do what Jennifer's saying, just trying to get us out there. I mean, we have a long way to go, but I do think we will make some progress, but I just don't want it to turn into, are you guys familiar with the Renaissance in the 60s, like with Warner Brothers, with all of the Black exploitation films?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want us to relive that. You know, it's like all this opportunity that's coming up, you know, and then all of a sudden you see all these films out there. The only difference is white people did those movies, but they starred Black people. And even for myself being in film, I was shocked and didn't even know that Blackula had a Black director, but only just him. Everyone else on the entire crew was white. It's like, what? You know, I mean, even in the fantasy world, we can't control anything. You know, I mean, you know, I'm hoping I answered your question. But
yeah, no, yeah, you did. And just speaking of scratching the surface, we're going to come back to the US for sure. But I want to look at the Canadian context in particular. And just for, you know, I'm hoping that Floyd, Jen, and Suds can kind of shed some light on this. Why do you think it's taken so long for us to come to this point? Or why is it that, you know, it's taken so long for the needle to move, it feels like, in the Canadian context in particular? So Jen, maybe I'll start with you, and then Floyd, and then we'll go to Suds.
Yeah, I try to contain my laugh.
Yes.
So here's the thing. Like I said, one of the biggest problems in Canada is that there is a story that's been told about us that is not true. And that story is that we are this multicultural melting pot where everybody gets along and all the opportunities are golden. Here's the thing. I mean, we did the numbers. We looked at the numbers. There's been 4 series created by Black people in Canada in the history of Canada. 4. And Suds and I created 2 of them. One's a miniseries. Floyd created the other one. I'm talking about drama series, okay? Mm-hmm. I mean, it is like on a network television station. I mean, it is crazy. Clement Virgo, who was the first Black director to get into Cannes, it's, you know, between this last film and this, it's been over 10 years. This is what is happening. Every film, like, you know, between Home Again and now, it's been 10 years. But here's the thing, no one noticed, no one cared. And so I think that we, for so long, Canadians have gotten away with, white Canadians, white people, white folks have gotten away with being this liberal, quote unquote, you know, really embracing kind of community where there was no numbers to back up the racial disparities. There was no, and they wanted to keep it that way. So every time we would say something like, well, gee whiz, we're not getting the same kind of investment and so forth, they said, well, we don't have any numbers. So those were some of the things that kept things exactly the same. Then, and here's the other thing, and every time someone got successful or something it didn't actually result in any kind of change in their work. There's something very entrepreneurial about America that I think we all are aware of that doesn't exist here. So success in Canada doesn't mean any kind of movement forwards. So you're literally starting from scratch at every turn. And last but not least, because there's no conversation about racism, anytime, and you even say, I really feel like we're having a different experience, or we're getting lesser opportunities in this particular situation. You know what happens? People don't come and say, gee whiz, this is a problem and so forth. You know what they say? They say, oh, you're just not grateful. You were given this amazing opportunity, and you are essentially the Black people I don't want to work with. So those are the kind of things that were allowed to happen in Canada, and no one cared. And so, and all of this, by the way, while maintaining this sense of, equity and fairness. And I point to the fact that what our premier came out just before, George Floyd said, oh, we don't have the same kind of policing problem that they have in America. When Scott Worthley did a study that pointed out that Black people were 20 times more likely to be killed by the police in Canada, 20 times than white folk, right? Where we had ministers saying things like, oh, we didn't have slavery in Canada. I mean, we had the exact same slavery. We had the same kind of experiences. The only main difference is that a lot of it wasn't entrenched in laws, so that, we didn't have the signs, as an older Black person said to me. It was the same, but we didn't have the signs. And not having the signs, and then people could ignore the problem.
Mm. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Floyd, what would you add to that?
I mean, yeah, everything that Jen said, and I would add two things. I mean, Black people are not valued in this country. Like this, I mean, this is just, I mean, I think this is part of, I mean, well, it's not part of, I guess the fact that we're not valued, that means in all walks of life, right? So the entertainment industry is no different. So when, networks are looking at buying our content, they're looking at the country, which, is majority white, and they're deciding, well, those people don't want to see that. And so we get passed over. Advertisers look at us, they say, well, they don't have any money to spend. So we get passed over. So that's, to me, like that's where it begins. And then I think it gets to the fact that we don't have any gatekeepers. Like we're completely excluded from, what's interesting to me is we don't have any gatekeepers. The few people who we have in the pipeline to become gatekeepers are so antagonized and abused within the within the workspaces that they just leave. They leave the industry, So I just feel like there's no, we've not, the country just has not been, and the industry has not been it's not been open. And then we get to the fact that our industry in Canada takes its cues from the international industry, which is even more white and more racist. And so it's so because of course, the business that we're in is especially when you're making hour-long drama, it's a substantial amount of money. You can't make a world-class television show without spending millions and millions of dollars. And in the Canadian system, we don't have that. So we have to go and look for international partners. And, you know, a lot of times it's going to Europe because that's where a lot of the money resides. And if you're making a show that has anything to do with Black people, they're not interested in that. You know, so it's just, to me, like it was interesting to kind of watch The Crown on Netflix and look at the fact that when you watch that show, you hardly ever see a Black Londoner on that show. Like it's extraordinary. Like, so it's like, I think this season when they were doing the whole apartheid story, there was a moment where you got to see like London and Black people in London. And I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. But meanwhile, you have Steve McQueen and the Small Axe series showing you a London that you've never seen. And it's just like, what? Like, it just goes to show you, like, there's this huge, like, bias within the industry international to just simply not tell our stories. And Canada's just like a little tiny piece of that, unfortunately.
And Suds?
I mean, the reason here with the discussion around systemic racism is because of the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others prompted collective action. That's it. Without collective action, we are in the same place as we were in April of 2020. Like, and this film industry now is they're just following the societal movement, not leading it by any stretch of the imagination. We're just simply reacting to this, like any other corporate sort of group of or corporate industry or whatever. You know, as long as I can remember, Black folks have been saying that we've been shot and harassed and treated unjustly by police since the 70s, when I was like a little kid, since the 80s, as long as I can remember. There was a guy in Toronto called Dudley Laws, and he put his life on the line. This man put his life on the line for us, you know, talking and open to ridicule, right? He's part of an organization called BADSI and Black Action Defense Coalition. And so that's been like, from in any American city, is the same thing, like from whenever, right? And so I remember it as a kid, but like he'd be ridiculed in the newspaper. He'd be ridiculed all over the place, and this and they just hound.
Oh, I think Suds' connection just froze there for a second.
People don't want to hear this. People don't want to hear this story. And we had to force them to listen. And it's only because of some broken windows.
Well, they got a lot of broken windows in the Capitol now.
Yeah. That's for sure. Right. And just, you know, thinking about the storytelling aspect of this in particular, Brian and Joyce, you've produced this film, The Color of Medicine, the story of the Homer G. Phillips Hospital. And so, you know, this movie tells the untold history of the this medical training hospital full of African-American doctors and nurses. So you can talk a little bit about what the story is, but I'm just curious from, you know, both of you, just why you wanted to make this film and the importance of being able to tell this kind of story, especially at a time like this. And Brian, we'll start with you and then Joyce.
I'm sorry. Before I answer that question, I just wanted to piggyback on something that Floyd and Suds were addressing, because it's actually interesting hearing this as American filmmakers, because at one time, like, all of our production was running away to Canada. Canada was the place to go film. Now, it wasn't Black productions that were running away. It was just production that was seen as, you know, the place where is LA losing its footing, because so much production is running to Canada. Even in the process of doing the film that we did, The Color of Medicine, when we actually came out and screened at some of the film festivals, I had never heard about the tragedy, the things that happened at Halifax. That was news to me. I had never heard about everything that happened there, which was a complete kind of relation directly to the same thing that kind of happened at Homer G. hospital. The point that I wanted to make, and it's having that uncomfortable conversation, because I've heard distributors say it to us, and they kind of tiptoe around it. At the end of the day, when people say Black content, they think less than. They think subpar. They think, okay, I'm going to have to take something that I have a slot to fill? Because if I have a slot to fill that I don't have nothing to go in there, I'll throw that in. And that goes from entertainment. It goes to the products that we produce, because there's been such a push now to buy Black, support Black. Before that, it's like, well, if I can't find what I'm looking for elsewhere, I'll go as if, why is everything, we've heard this even from our distributors when we went and showed them our content, they were like, wow, we haven't seen content like this from you before. I mean, trying to find polite ways to say that. So it's one of those things where, again, having the uncomfortable conversation, understanding how they view our content. And I see the thing of it is, I want to say making an adjustment, but some of that I have no control over. It's almost like I can do everything. I can jump over a roof, but I can't change your view of me and what I'm doing if your view is set in stone. All I can keep doing is creating what I'm creating. But it's so disheartening that Black content is seen as subpar across the board. That has not changed, regardless of what has happened now. Networks just need more of it. Like, their backs against the wall. For me to survive and not look like the racist network that I am, I need some Black content. And not only that, I need some Black content creators. But the whole, and now bringing that, because I just really wanted to comment on that before I forgot, but it actually ties into the color of medicine, because I think I mentioned this to you when we had our brief conversation. We do, as a filmmaker, and I always thought, as a Black filmmaker, I should have the freedom to tell whatever kind of stories I want to tell. If I want to tell white stories, if I want to tell Black stories, because my experience of them are completely different. But after especially telling the story of Homer G. Phillips Hospital, we do have a responsibility to tell these stories, because if we didn't tell this documentary, nobody would know about this story. So many of our Black stories get swept under the rug, and as Black independent filmmakers, we're kind of you're put into a box. Like, I want to make this type of film, but do I tell this story, and are they tired of hearing this type of story? We're always questioning the content that we want to make about us. I mean, that's how crazy the business is. It has us questioning the stories that we want to tell about us. It's a crazy situation that we're in. But The Color of Medicine was definitely one of those stories that, and because again, I don't consider myself a documentary filmmaker. I consider myself a filmmaker. But in doing this documentary, the one thing I wanted to do was make this feel like a film, so you don't feel like, because we have a tendency to tune out when we get documentary. Documentary sounds too much like a document. A document means I'm gonna learn something, or you may want something legally from me. So we tune out very quickly. So there was all these avenues that I think we took into consideration in making these. And as we learned about the story, we realized the story was so much bigger than even Homer G. Phillips himself, the attorney who got the hospital started, but even the doctors and the nurses, the numbers of people that went through this place and achieved a level of excellence. You cannot let that go by. You cannot not tell this story. But I'll let Jeff tell you this, because it all started basically from the sense of community we've had as Black people.
And that's what I was going to jump on with. Just like being a part of this panel, to me, is such an honor, to meet all of you. I already know Brian, but to meet all of you, because again, I think Suggs mentioned it, or never, Floyd mentioned it, about that collective. Like, we have to work together, because white people are not going to help us the way we can help ourselves. And if we don't come together in a global sense, not just America, but America and Canada, we're doomed, And in essence of The Color of Medicine, that story came to us because my community, my little neighborhood that I lived in, this Black doctor that I saw every day going to work, I used to babysit his daughter, and he came to me and said, this story needs to be told. But that's how I learned about it. I didn't learn about it in the libraries. I didn't learn about it at school. My neighbor told me the story. And, but that's how we've existed throughout time, is keeping our oral history among each other. Because if it were not for that, like the same with Hidden Figures, all of these different stories, if we hadn't, worked together to get that story out there, you guys might not have heard about it, because it wasn't going to be, I didn't, look it up on a computer. It wasn't there, and so that's how it all started, getting that film made. And when we won Best Documentary in the Montreal Black Film Festival. The gentleman who, Brian, I forget Brian's last name at this moment, but that we were told that it moved the Jewish community because that same thing had happened to a hospital there. And that's why they, chose our film. Although it was Black, they said that they totally were able to relate to it. And I mean, that's a great thing, but at the same time, why wouldn't it exist? We have stories just like that. We have all the same kind of Westerns, like I always tell people, and then I will, stop. When people ask me, they say, well, why aren't Black people happy to have their little films? I said, what I would like to see is white people have everything. They're in outer space. They're in the 1800s. They're under the water. They're, all these different genres. Why can't we be that way? We can live in the ocean. We can live in outer space. We can be in the Old West. I mean, why can't we have all that? Because we were there. So why can't we exist in those genres? And those are the things that becoming a filmmaker was what I wanted to do, was to be able to tell stories in all of those genres. So.
And I'm just curious, what do you think is, for everyone, is the role of who gets, I guess, awarded? Because you just talked about, getting an award at the Montreal Black Film Festival, which we now have, the Black Film Festival, the Toronto Black Film Festival, which we're in right now. But there are, of course, these larger institutions that people often look to, like the Emmys and the Oscars, or even the CSAs. So what's the role of those institutions, I guess, in terms of what kinds of stories Black filmmakers feel permitted to tell? Because we know that historically they tend to award a certain type of narrative or a certain type of story that gets told. So is that something that you all think about at all as creators, or what's the role of that? And I guess, Jen, I'll start with you.
Well, I think as creators, we would be lying if we pretended we would not want to be awarded for the quality of our work. I mean, that would be a lie. And so so here's the thing. I have, in watching a lot of what I do, what I have come to the realization is that it's subtle and it's different from filmmaker to filmmaker, but there are some things that Black folks focus on and do that Black folks just love. And I think other folk love, but white folks might not love it as much because, even in terms of the protagonist, the center of everything, and often disengaged from connection and all this. And the more disengaged they are, the more white folks love them, because that means that they're super geniuses and they can just solve everything. So, that's a storytelling trope, and that gets rewarded in the mainstream a lot. And so what has to happen is there's got to be more of us being a part of those institutions, giving out awards, because then we'll be saying, oh no, like that thing that just happened, in Lovecraft, country was so off the rails, it has to be awarded. I mean, that is just, there was these moments that just was so powerful and was just so Black and so human, right? And so we need people that look like us in these institutions. Now, I also love the fact that Stephen James and his brother, that these young men have created a Black Academy in Canada. Because again, like we had no Black Screen Office or no Black organization on a national level or even on a local level in a significant way advocating for Black screen creators, we have had no space that awarded us either. Right. So they've now just created the Black Academy and, sorely needed, but I also think that it's time we got to rip the fabric of what is there apart and say, no, we deserve our spot in the room. And maybe we can teach you about expanding your vision Because here's the thing, I feel like Black folks, because we were weaned on content all over the world, European content, Asian content, American, white American content, primarily when you say American content, because we've been weaned on all this stuff, our vision is pretty open. So what they need to do is that they need to get as good as us and expand their vision. That's my take on it.
Okay. Floyd, what would be your take on that?
I mean, I will say this, like, awards are great. For me, it's about audience, and it's about the fact that, like my mother, she watches she's like the Murder, She Wrote, CBS procedural, like she's like every CBS procedural she watches. I want her to be able to watch a show where the protagonist is a Black female, period, full stop. And, and if possible, somebody who's from her community. That's it. So to me, like, a lot of what I'm like, my focus is really about, I want to make sure that whatever the 4 or 6% of Black people living in Canada, that they all know about whatever I'm doing and they have an opportunity to see it, period. That's really what I care about. I mean, the reality is that in terms of the whole awards conversation, I think, it's interesting. So I recently read a book, I think it's called The Big Picture, about the making of Chinatown, the classic movie that everybody hails as being like one of the greatest movies ever written, ever made. And what was fascinating about the book, I mean, obviously it's a story about 4 white men, but what was fascinating about the book is that Robert Towne, like almost every screenwriting program that I know, they talk about Chinatown being the perfect script. It is a model for storytelling in our industry. And Robert Towne won an Oscar for that script. When you read the book tells you Robert Towne did not write the script by himself. He has a guy who he has always written with, who's a co-writer who does not get credited, and that Roman Polanski actually wrote the last half hour of that movie. And that Robert Towne actually hated the movie when he first saw it. So we've kind of like, we've taken in all of that historical knowledge about what makes a good story, what makes a good narrative from the mainstream, from white people. That, like, we've taken that in and internalized it, and it's infected our work. And at various times we rebel against it, and that's why I feel like you can feel that tension whenever you're watching a movie where it's made by a Black filmmaker, written by a Black filmmaker, and it's about Black people and their lives, and you can always feel this tension because they're making something that it's being shaped and molded in this form that we've all accepted as being the norm, but at the same time it's trying to be more and transcend. And I think that's the thing that we're all struggling with, I think. I mean, I know for myself, it's like I find myself constantly asking questions about, like, well, why do we have to do this at 10 pages in? And why is it like bad to have like not just 3 stories, not just an ABC story, but why can't we have like an ABCDEFG story? Like why can't we make it dense? And why does every show have to have like families where it's like 2 parents and 3, max 4 siblings? Why can't we have a show where like there's like 12 siblings and parents and grandparents? Like it's just there's a, I don't know. I feel like the question about our industry and awards is one that's about systems I mean, it always goes back to systems. And Jen, you and I have been on a jury before for the CSAs. And I mean, part of the reality is that it's like, we don't even get the shots.
But listen, babe, this is what I'm trying to say. Is like, we need to be in the room, because look, we're on the jury. Ava, a very small film that did not even get telefilm funded, won the best movie in Canada that year.
I know.
You know, it was an Iranian filmmaker. Was it an Iranian filmmaker?
That's right.
And we were on the jury, and we made that happen because we were like, no, this story moves us, right? And that is what I'm trying to say. Unless we're in the rooms, you know, it's going to be the same thing. Listen, I was making a joke about, you know, the one protagonist and his, like, you know, disembodied connection to, you know, to his fellow man and all this kind of stuff. I mean, this is Chinatown. This is all of this shit. And I did like Chinatown as a movie. I liked it a lot. But so what I'm trying to say is that I'm advocating that when we make our movies and our work, you know, I don't find, for example, when I talked about Lovecraft, I didn't find it conventional in any way. There were episodes where like, there's a billion characters. I'm trying to keep up. You know, they did so many things that I thought was just unique to how Black people like to tell story. Antebellum. I mean, you know, I just watched that film with my daughters, and we were like ripped apart, devastated. And I made sure I went to IMDb and I voted and I posted. And so what I'm trying to say is that it's like more of us has to be in the room. And then we also have to take responsibility. Anytime I watch a Black thing, and I make a point of watching Black shows, and I like them, and I like it, and I like it well, I without a doubt, I stop what I'm doing, and I go into IMDb or some other place at Rotten Tomatoes, and I vote, and I make comments. Because here's the thing, right? People are really invested in keeping things exactly the fucking same. You know, like Star Trek Discovery. Love me, Michael Burnham. Love me, Michael Burnham. People, the hate on that fantastic woman and that franchise, but on her. People will say, oh, we love, you know, this character. We love this character. We love Tilly. We love, and literally this goddess who is so good. It's just, so, you know, so what I guess I'm trying to say is that, so we have to, at every turn, not just for our own work, we have to stand up. And then when we are in places like you and I were on that jury, we have to be like, we have to fight. Like at every time I go into a space where I'm given the opportunity to make a decision, I do not let anybody tell me shit. I'm like, this is what I think. This is what I believe. Okay, you know, I'll, like, if I don't win, I don't win, but I will fight tooth and nail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I wanted to say something. And what may I say?
Yes,
what
yes,
Jennifer said. We just made a movie called Hidden Orchard Mysteries. And it was basically about two girls of color that were like Nancy Drew. And that's what we wanted to do, you know, and it's so funny, the backlash, even though the film did well, but the backlash of people, you know, we got great reviews, but still those haters, like you're saying, Jennifer, Black people don't live like that. Black people don't do mysteries. We're like, what? You know, and the funny thing is, it was based on my neighborhood I grew up in. I mean, this was, we did this to have fun, you know, and I'm like, damn, we can't even be this. It's like everything is supposed to be like we made this whole thing up or whatever, and just people hating on it, saying Black people don't live like that. Black people don't have two people in the household. Black people, just like what Floyd was saying, they tore our little fantasy world apart, saying Black people don't work on mysteries. Are you crazy? And it's like, yes, they do. You know.
Well, and I'm curious though, is there any aspect of that backlash that is Black people themselves, like just having expectations on what the storytelling is supposed to be? So is this coming from Black people as well?
It was coming from both, yeah. But we did have great reviews too, but we were shocked when we saw that Black people, which I hate to say, I tend to talk about this on other panels, we have to stop hating each other. You know, Brian always corrects me because he goes, whenever there's a Black movie, you're much harder on the Black movie. Okay. True. But I want it to be so good, so bad that I may be a little bit more harsher on it. But I do know that when I started doing stuff in this industry a long time ago, being a Black female music video director and stuff like that, I had so much hate because I was the only woman on set with all these men, and they would look at me and say, how the hell are you going to be directing this video? I mean, I started a long time ago in the 90s with this shit, where people were saying, well, you can't direct. How are you coming out here? I mean, so not only did you have to deal with being Black, you had to deal with being a woman. So I had to start there, but just, I always push now with people, we all need to work together because we're not going to change anything with them. And I'm like with Floyd, when it comes to Emmys and all of that, I don't give a shit. I'm like, okay, if I never win one, I don't care. But I just think, like you said, that's an established, like we feel like we've made it because we won an Emmy. Why? Well, what does that change? Doesn't mean anything.
It gets to your next job, though, and your next job tends to be better.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I used to work and I used to hate award season because I'd never see people just clamoring and just. I mean, I hate award season because it's just so much bullshit. It really is. You know. But I'm glad that people like yourselves and Jordan Peele and all of these different people, and Ava and even like the Bryans and the Suds and the Floyds and the Jennifers. We got Carl Seaton, we got Jeff Bird, we got different people that are actually out there doing stuff. And hopefully you guys will get rewarded for your efforts the way you should be,
Girl, from your lips to God's ears.
To God's ears, yeah. Well, that point that you just made, Joyce, actually segues really nicely into my next question, because of course, ultimately this does come down to inequity and structural racism. But is there any role that you see Black creators as a collective having in helping to make this ecosystem a bit more manageable? Like, is there any role for creators themselves? And Joyce, you kind of got us started there a little bit, so maybe I'll go to Brian and then Suds and then Jen.
I think there is a role. I know, like in America, you're starting to see it a little bit. Like, I love the initiative that Ava DuVernay has created, where she's created a database of Black filmmakers from every position, because there's always that adage, well, I can't find anybody Black to do that position, so therefore we're going to hire somebody white. Every set that I've been on, I've never counted more than 3 of us. Every editing room I've gone in, it goes down. I've never counted more than 2. So to have that database, but it's a shame that Ava just came in the business. So I think of, what have all of the brothers and sisters before her been doing? The bad thing is we still have that, especially, and it's weird because I don't sense it as much in the women, but I definitely sense it amongst the men, that only one of us can get in the room. And I've seen brothers do stuff to get in the room and close the door behind them, not so I'm gonna get an opportunity and reach back, so that you never get this opportunity. So I've eliminated my competition, quote unquote, when we're really not. That is not your competition whatsoever. But and I don't know how to get around that. When you mentioned that idea, Jennifer, that you go on and write reviews for movies, man, we all know how powerful a review is for somebody, and it starts the ball rolling. But we just don't do that enough. Or when we do it, we're gonna go on and tear that film down. Well, I know what they was trying to make, but let me tell them about themselves. I mean, and they will go in from the wardrobe to the girl's hair.
They said, we were too pretty. Like, it's too pretty. Like, why does it look like that? It's like, what? Everybody just with a needle sticking out their arm. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we don't have to all go down that down that road. You made me lose my track from what I was saying, but that was the point that I was making was what I like I said, I got completely lost with what you said about, because I'm seeing the reviews now, but I definitely think at the end of the day, we need to, that was the point I was making. We definitely need to be our own support system. It's almost like, this was my thought process of awards. And I have a background coming from sports, because before I got into film, my whole pursuit was sports. I just had so many surgeries. I've never made it. I made it as far as semi-pro baseball, and that's as far as I got. But if I ever sat back and waited for somebody to come and award me and compliment me and tell me how good I am and how I am for the next level, I'd still be sitting back there waiting. It's not going to happen. but at the same time, you got to find something in which you're not lacking. You know where your strengths and your weaknesses are. So we spend so much time trying to deflect from them instead of shoring those walls up in the meantime. Like right now, I've always said, coming out of COVID, if you are going into COVID and coming out the same person, you completely wasted your time, because you've been given free time to try to close this amazing gap that has been created between us and everybody on the other side of us content creators. It's an amazing gap that has been created. We aren't meant to catch up, but at the same time, it doesn't stop us from pursuing it.
And Suggs, would you?
I'm done preaching for the night. I'm gonna get up my soapbox.
Thank you for that, Brian. And Suggs, what would you add?
I think like part of that whole thing is that we got to talk about the next generation, because they need opportunities to be trained, and we need opportunities to interact with them. They're not getting enough opportunities. So we need to have more shows, and we need to bring them on and train them. And so, and we need to have this thing rolling and rolling and rolling. So they need the industry experience so that they can take that back to their independent work. And so this all needs to happen because it's not happening. Like we're looking for the next generation of young Black filmmakers. We're looking for the next generation of young Black actors, and we need to have these experiences. We need to create these shows and these opportunities. And if we don't, then, I mean, it's really kind of crazy, because there are these gaps of people who have made films in Canada, for example. And there's like this big 10-year gap between any of the features that we've made. So like, in terms of like, where are the Black films that are coming out? Like, I mean, Floyd made a film a few years ago, but it's like, these are large gaps between people like Clement Virgo, Charles Officer, myself, and like now we got a cat named Art coming on the scene. Like these large gaps, and we are not really, developing, the filmmakers that we need to. I mean, these opportunities, like the series development, comedy shows. Black people are hella funny, but we don't see a lot of comedy coming out of Canada. So we need to do a lot of things like that. But it's like, again, as we say, it's like collective action. That's where we need to actually make the investments in time and effort. And one foot in the industry, one foot in our independent work, which is how Jennifer and I sort of create a career. Like right now, I have to get up, folks. I'm directing The Flash, and I'm late for a meeting. But I just want to say thank you to Jennifer, who was giving me some flowers today, because it's my birthday today.
Happy birthday again.
Oh, happy birthday. Happy birthday, sir.
Happy birthday. Onset on your birthday.
Yeah, so
what can you do?
But the thing is that we have to do this stuff and work together to do this. And organizations like the Black Screen Office, organizations and companies like Array Films, like what Ava's doing, is incredible. And we need to support her and the work that she's doing, because again, she people in the industry. Look at like anybody who's directed Queen Sugar, like that's a whole bunch of people's first television episode. And so she's brought created opportunities for lots of filmmakers. And so she's like, after that, it's like fly, little bird, and then you got to go and get your second. But like this is the kind of thing that we need to do. So that's what we aim to do with our next series, is give a lot of people their sort of first and second television episode. So these are some of the goals that we have, but we have to work collectively.
Well said. Well said.
Thanks so much, Suds. And Jen, would you add anything to that quickly?
I agree with everybody, what everyone's saying. I mean, it's that thing, that cliche, what time is it? Our time is now, if not when, if not now, when? Like, this is it, man. We are the seniors here in some of this. And here's the thing. We were never giving those opportunities ourselves. And as it seemed like it's unfolding, we have to do everything in our power, I think, like Brian says, to seize the moment, but also, like Sud says and Floyd says, and everybody really, and also bust open the doors and also bring along the young people. We cannot let the divide and conquer and the bullshit that has been permeated the industry to infect us. You know, Brian, I have to tell you, I have a similar experience with particularly Black males in America, and the experience left me terrified because it was kind of like, it was like you said, it was like it's all me, it's all for me, and
Yes.
and I'm not going to do anything. I actually heard a Black man literally say, "Well, I'm here because I'm talented. And if they're not here because they're not talented, and that's not my problem." And I was like, whoa. And so that's the wrong place. And I think that Ava and Oprah, you know, and amazing people like them, they are, you know, like they're blazing a path, you know, and I think that we ourselves, as some of the older filmmakers, have to shed any kind of bitterness or any kind of sense of like, this didn't happen for me and it's now, you know, no. We got to shed all that stuff and just figure out how do we do it together.
Absolutely. I got to go. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, it was great to talk to you.
Definitely. It was a pleasure meeting you, and pleasure conversating with you, boss.
All right, absolutely.
Bye, thank you.
Color medicine. All right, take care, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yes.
One last question before we, before we wrap up here. You're all on the creator side in some kind of capacity. So I'm just wondering, you know, we've talked a lot about some of the changes that we've seen over the last year, but what would you like to see on a structural level that would make the work that you do easier? So whether it's like, this is the CMF needs to give X amount of money every year to Black creators to help us do our job, or, you know, whatever the equivalent of that is in the US needs to allot, X% to our industry. Like, what are those specific changes that you would like to see happening? And Floyd, I want to start with you, and then I'll go to Joyce, and then Brian and Jack.
I feel like in the Canadian context, you just said it. I mean, like, I think there should be some funding set aside for content that is produced by Black content creators. I mean, I think that's the first step. I think there has to be, you know, more. I think we have to do more to get people in the industry, to get those who are in the industry, like, give them more opportunities, to get people who are like intermediate or senior in the Canadian industry, get those people into the international industry. Like, whatever, like, to me, it's just about growing the field. Like, we do not have, we are so far from having a critical mass of Black professionals in our industry. I mean, it's just sad, actually. Like, it's not even.
Yep.
Like, it's just when you think about the fact, like, I was looking for a Black male writer for my series this year. All the Black male drama writers who have experience, who are at a, let's say, an intermediate level, because I was looking for someone at that level, because there's one show, none of them were available.
Wow.
You know? Wow. And this is the thing. It's like, you know, like, everyone's, look, it's great. Everybody's working. It's amazing. And I hope it stays that way. But the reality is that, you know, we've all had the experience where we've gotten a call from our agent, and, you know, there's a white producer and who you've known forever, who's never done anything with you, who's never called you, who would never meet with you. Suddenly they want you to be on board their project. And I don't I'm not into that. I basically have gotten to the place where it's like, yeah, I'm not interested in helping you get your project done at this time when this is when the door is finally open for me to get my own project done.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so for me, yes, like everything that you mentioned in terms of changing the industry, but honestly, like we just don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you like recently one of our broadcasters just let go all of their senior executives. Like they've all left, and everybody has said that that's a sign that, you know, they're looking at consolidating and, you know, decreasing their level of production. Well, if that's the case, that means that here we go again. Just as the world is opening up and people are being more open to the idea of ordering a show that's by Black creators, well, now we're going to be ordering fewer shows. So now you've just like your chances of getting a show on the air just decreased. So, you know, it's just, I don't know. I just feel like, yes, more money, more training, more like opportunities to kind of broaden your network so that you can work internationally and with international partners and get your shows properly financed and made. Yes to all of that.
That's great. And Joyce, what would you add?
I would definitely say if it was an opportunity, pretty much what I was stating earlier, and I agree with Floyd. I definitely think there is money out there. I mean, we see money every day. I mean, we were over in Greece, and I mean, it was just ridiculous, the money that's you seeing, right? And there are people that have money, and there are Black people that have money. And I know you mentioned Oprah and Ava DuVernay, because she's under the Oprah umbrella. You know, now she's been anointed, right? But there's so many sports figures and billionaires that are, and entrepreneurs that are African American and just of color, period, that if they even just, what is it, the gentleman that is Amazon? I mean, just a slither of the money that they would never even miss would make so much, would help us in aspects of making films. And the funny thing is, they won't really, you know, I know people always say the entertainment industry is you know, it's a challenge, you know, like you may not make your money back. And that's not true, you know, especially right now. You know, anything that you invest in, people are stuck at home. People are going to watch it. So, you know, we've been bombarded with people asking us for content because they don't have anything, because no one's making anything. So they want whatever you have in your vault, you know. So I think that if entrepreneurs, and particularly African Americans who are in the sports and who are in all types of huge entities, these rappers, these musicians that have all this disposable income, set up a program so that more entrepreneurs and more people of color that are talented in whether it be film, music, or whatever, has an opportunity to create more, and that's what I would do if I had the opportunity.
And Brian?
Well, I think always the biggest mountain is always money, 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 money. You nailed money on the head. But I also think, aside from money, because again, you can find that creative enough that you can shoot a piece of your idea, put it on YouTube or Kickstarter, and you can get funding enough to get your idea seen. The one thing, and Floyd, you made me think of this, and Jennifer, you made me think of this. The one thing we don't have and I've never had, only time I had this was in film school, and I think it was a Black creatives. One of the reasons I think the business is so cutthroat is because we don't have the ability to go somewhere and fail. Because once we fail, we're actually learning how to make the show better. Dick Wolf didn't come out the box, you know, success. He failed a bunch of times and still kept getting these opportunities. But the problem is we got one shot. One shot. And that's our thought process. And so to this shot, in this one shot, not only do I have to make it, but I also got to reach back and cut off the competition because I don't want them to see who the next up and comer is. I got one shot to make it, and we just don't have that ability, that free. I think some that way. Where's your freedom to create and make the show? Because we're under there like, ooh, this has to be this, and I'm trying to check all their boxes and still trying to make my show. At the end of the day, you just made a big piece of shit because now it's nobody wants to see this. But it's the constant pressure that we feel as independent Black filmmakers. Whites, they don't have that. They can go and fail because at the end of the day, film was always a leisure activity to them. I got the extra money. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna make a film. For us, man, I'm about to hustle. I'm about to go work these 3 jobs. I'm about
you got a mortgage, a house, you got to do all that stuff. Just
money from my friends. I'm gonna make this movie and learn how to edit to get it done. You got to do everything to get it done, but we still don't have that freedom to actually make something. And it wasn't 100. It didn't flop. It didn't make what we thought it was gonna make. But now we know what to do. Now we go back and do this again. No, dude, you're done. We'll never coming back to you again. What they will say is, hey, we gave you an opportunity to make your Love Jones, and nobody came and supported it. We gave you make your Black romantic comedy, but Black people don't want to see it because nobody came to go see it. And it's just, now we won't talk about, no, that you didn't market it, you didn't promote it the same. No, they won't say that. They said, we gave you an opportunity and nothing happened. So now we're moving on. So now we want you to go make that Dead Presidents 3, and now we'll be back in the game. So it's just, we keep constantly get put in the same box to the point where we need to get in the room, like you were saying, and then you need to put a stick of dynamite in each corner of the box and blow that bitch up and recreate a whole different structure that don't exist yet. And that's what I think what Sub was saying about the education, because what we have right now is not working, and it's going to continue to be this until we change it.
And then not to end on that, but I also, Brian and I make it a practice. Whenever we do a project, I always go and pull 2 or 3 Black, male and female, to work on our sets all the time. And those same people that we've done that with, we had people working with us on The Color of Medicine. They've gone on to make their own films, and they constantly call. And, I have like mentees. And I wish I'd had someone to mentee me, but I didn't. But I make it a point, like what Jennifer said, to do that, because you said, like what you said, it is very important because there is no one else but us. So we have to do it.
Mm-hmm. And Jen, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
We were talking about essentially what we need and what, and everybody's pretty much said it, money and so forth. One of the things that I don't know, I feel like I have to always do something. And so one of the things I've done is I've become the co-chair of an organization called the CISF. And what it is that we're looking to get $10 million into the Canadian industry that because in Canada, BIPOC is the larger umbrella from which our government is more motivated. So under that landscape of BIPOC, 5 million of the 10 would go to Black creators, but it would be adjudicated by only diverse people. And so it's something that myself and and a group of folks are very passionate about, because look, at the end of the day, it's something that the way the funding structure is meant to work, we support emerging, mid-range, and senior. And so now imagine, like, you have your film and you got your funding, but you're always short. Black folks, we always get. And so this is a tough. I really try to think about what is it that we need at every level. So in having this opportunity, Lalita Krishna is my co-chair on this. In having this opportunity, it was like, how can we help? So that's one of the things. And we in front of the federal government, and we're saying to the federal government, you need to step up. You need to give us this. So that's number one thing. And so that's in process. Yeah. And yes, 2. The second thing, and I don't have any control over this, but I mean, I think that as Black folk, it is incumbent on us to reach out to and to put pressure on the rich Black folks. You're talking about like all those sports people, but also look, Jeff Bezos' wife, God bless her, she just gave away like $30 billion.
I thought it was 500 million to the HBCUs or something like that. 500 million.
You know what I'm saying? Listen, and it's not really these crazy stipulations where you literally have to give away your kidney. So white people, you say you're allies. That is what an ally looks like. Okay.
Yes.
And we all know that story is so important to mental health, to well-being, to the creative spirit, to the world. Black folks have given so much to this planet, you know? And so, like, I feel like, you know, you say you're an ally and you got that, you know, you got those 10 billion or those 50 billion in the bank or whatever you got, even 100 million, I don't know. I say that anytime you come across one of these folks talking about how they love and they support, ask them, what the fuck are they doing to support financially? How are they helping in a real and meaningful way? Because, you know what, like I said, we are surrounded by bullshit, you know? I know this because journalism and all the liberal journalists, for example, who have been telling the stories, the news of the day for however long, 100 years or so, they're the same liberal people who have perpetuated these narratives about us as Black people being criminal, XXXX. So these are liberal people who see things in a fair way, quote unquote. What I'm trying to say is that be suspect when anybody says they're a liberal, unless they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. That's it. And we, as Black folks, we have to hold them accountable, especially if these are people we know or we have access to.
Well, put your money where your mouth is. That's a great place for us to leave it. Thank you, Jennifer, Brian, Floyd, Joyce. It's been incredible to talk to you guys about this. Really great to have you. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us. Looking forward to whatever watching, engaging with whatever you're all working on. And I hope we'll be having a better conversation by the time this time next year rolls around. So thank you all.
Definitely.
Okay,
It was a
bye.
pleasure. Nice meeting you guys.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Take care.
Good luck on your productions, you guys.
Yes, good luck, everybody. Blessings.
Take care.
Thank you.